Riai. Stagnant night air hung across the plains of the humans' northern kingdom Sovane. The thick, tall grasses concealed sleeping animals, and the plants quivered only when restlessness crept upon a slumbering creature. While the veld had the height to mask the dozing herds, it did not have a stature capable of covering the human settlement called Fagori. Upon the arrival of a band of rogue Rhysegli, a herd of oryx arose from sleep and instinctively dashed in the opposite direction. Luckily for the hoofed mammals, they were not the band's intended targets. The predators surrounded Fagori in a prearranged formation with every detail meticulously planned. A feast of blood would flow through the streets of the town before dawn ascended. One Rhysegli, Riai, was new to this band. Riai had participated in numerous raids on human domiciled towns, but those had been sanctioned from the clans of old ages ago. Excitement welled in Riai's gut, and they shifted their bare azure feet back and forth while waiting behind a clump of ferns. The dry dirt between their elongated hindclaws reminded them of home. Hunting in the savannah was where Riai belonged. All philosophical arguments to dissuade them against participating fell away as soon as the hunt began. Riai sensed the hunger of all the Rhysegli in the air, and it only heightened their own impulse to feed. Gragon, the leader, was nearly invisible. Their black flesh sat motionless, 2 paces away from Riai, and yet the newcomer could not distinguish between the band's leader and the foliage's shadows. Riai would scour a few predetermined residences with Gragon. They had scoped out the dwellings during the day, discovering no humans posing a threat to either of the Rhysegli. As a new addition to the band, Riai wasn't shocked about the assignment. While Gragon ensured Riai followed orders, there would be no real danger, even if Riai were entirely incompetent. However, Riai was not inept. Back in the time of the clans, Riai had been so subtle and bloodletting that they had developed a reputation for it. Soon a pungent smell sprang through the air, signaling for the feast to commence. Riai resented being so close to the radiating source of the scent, but Gragon stopped secreting the overwhelming odor as soon as everyone had had a chance to sense it. A dozen Rhysegli stalked toward Fagori. When Gragon and Riai approached the first small home on the outskirts of the village, Riai peered through a paneless window. Along the floor, 2 straw beds lay in the back corners. From a clay fire pit in the center of the room, dying embers flickered up and fluttered around until their extinction. Out of the spraying cinders' reach, a few hemp hammocks hung from the ceiling's posts. An older woman occupied one straw bed, while a young man took the other. Even younger humans filled the hammock sacks. Before Riai could communicate with Gragon about preferences, a slight gust of air against Riai's armored plates signaled the leader's entry into the house. They could not see the dark physique, even with the aid of the pitiful embers, but they listened for Gragon's heartbeats and located the leader near the woman's bed. Riai effortlessly squeezed through the opening, taking care not to stir anything that had the potential to awaken the humans. Luckily, the home had few furniture items to mind. Riai had to be wary of the straw-covered floor, but that was manageable. Gragon began to feed on the older woman. The nutty aroma filled Riai's nostrils and enticed them toward their own meal. Riai knelt beside the young man and carefully sank their fangs into the underside of his jaw. It was an awkward location to bite, but people rarely bothered to check such places for puncture wounds. As both a matter of pride and practicality, Riai preferred the humans they fed upon to remain ignorant of the feast if possible. One of Riai's fangs pierced a vessel under a molar, and blood flowed into their hollow incisors. The man's blood tasted as the older woman's had smelled, mediocre but satisfying nonetheless. Still, the sensation of drinking straight from a living source reminded Riai what they had been missing for so long. Before the lad lost too much blood, Riai sealed the wounds shut with tiny dabs of saliva onto each lesion. To evade retaliation, it was vital that the band did not kill any of the humans during their raid. It would be ideal for the humans to never learn of the attack, but that was unlikely. Not all Rhysegli shared Riai's preference toward discretion. One of the others within the band were likely to leave bite marks in a noticeable location. Already, Gragon had finished feeding on the woman and her younger suspended children. It was impressive that Gragon had not roused any of them during the process, and Riai admired the Rhysagly's swiftness and caution. The two Rhysagly climbed out the window and proceeded onto the next few houses, pumping out an enormous volume of blood without the slightest suspicion left in their wake. They worked like a marvelously efficient machine, and once their circuit had concluded, they ceased the hunt. Avoiding detection, the pair hurried out of town and returned to the shadows of the foliage to await the rest of the group. "Another successful raid," Gragon said. The leader's tone was pleased, but their faces' hard shell could not have divulged the expression, even if Riai could see it in the dull moon's light. "I can't remember the last time a raid went that well," Riai replied. "I can barely remember my last hunt. You've been living restricted for too long. We all have. Our numbers are small now, but more will join our ranks as word of our efforts spread. Mark my words, Riai. The ages of men will fall by the wayside. We will write them out of memory. We will feast upon the blood of their kings and topple their idols. They will serve us as livestock serves them." Gragon spoke passionately about the matter as if it was their destiny to achieve. Unnerved, Riai squirmed. They didn't particularly care about the overwhelming presence of humans, but the mages within their ranks discouraged Rhysagly from hunting them as a species. If the rogue band weren't careful, the humans would declare war on them and win by any means they could. Riai had seen it happen that exact way throughout their history, although it was not without a price to the humans too. In addition to staggering casualty numbers, there had been losses in scientific and magical advancements. So long as the band was discreet, their small raids would probably go unnoticed. However, if Gragon succeeded with gathering a large following, an even more sizable force would quell their encroachments. At the first sniff of a human army, Riai planned to forsake the band. Riai hadn't responded to Gragon's plans. They wished to say something diplomatic, but honest. "Do you disagree with my intentions?" Gragon asked after registering the pause. "If those are your intentions, then you must be strategic in gathering your forces. Once the humans sense something is out of place, they will strike with overwhelming numbers and magicians." Nothing scared Riai more than sorcerers, though they had never faced a warlock or a wizard. Gragon reclined into a sandy spot in the dirt and ruminated on Riai's words. The speckles of moon's light reflecting in the leader's eyes vanished as they turned aside. With the disappearance of the illuminations, Gragon slid into the background, imperceptible to Riai. The pair of Rhysagly waited in the darkness for the rest of their band to return. Gradually, the others crept from the town and regrouped. Riai recognized some of the forms as fellow ex-clan members, and some from more recent group meetings. The end of the raid drew near. The band would return to the nest after the stragglers departed the town. "Rhysagly!" The word was screamed out in the middle of the village repeatedly. Other voices echoed incoherent chaos, shouting something about the chief. A final villager hollered, "Check the spawn!" This was almost a worst-case scenario, short of killing a spawn. The humans were fanatical about protecting their precious religious symbols. If a Rhysagly had harmed one, the band could expect Panite's armies at their doorstep the next morning. A clawed hand grabbed Riai's forearm before they smelled the scent, signaling the group to flee. Most Rhysagly retreated toward the nest. "Will you come with me to scout the village?" Gragon asked. Invigorated with fresh blood, Riai was prepared for battle if necessary. They nodded. Gragon and Riai darted back toward the village, careful not to make a sound. As they approached, they witnessed a public demonstration in their pitiful town square. By the light of the torches they carried, at least 70 humans shifted upon their recently drained, unsteady feet. They listened to an older woman speak. It was the same one from the first house that Riai and Gragon had visited that evening. "I am perfectly fine. There is nothing to worry about," she said. "I have found marks on myself, but they chose not to drain me completely. Their intention was simply to eat, not to kill. For all we know, they could have been a starving caravan passing through." "But what if they aren't?" another voice demanded from the group. "We could ask the prisoner." At that comment, Gragon and Riai crept closer along a narrow gap between buildings to get a better vantage point. A few men dragged forward a Rhysagly and snared a netting. One of the men faltered from wooziness, and additional humans supported him. Thick steel ropes forced a yam-colored Rhysagly into a curled position. and its claws struggled against the trappings without progressing toward freedom.
"Does it even speak the common tongue?"
someone else from the crowd called. The captured Rhysegli spat at the assembled group.
"Yes, I do."
"Why has our town been attacked?" the older woman asked as she approached them. "We have lived in peace with the Rhysegli for decades."
"Tell me, are you a huntress?"
"No," the woman replied.
"Then you would not understand. Our band feels a calling to earn our feast."
"I will not pretend to understand your inclinations. However, your band has violated the truce between our races this evening."
"Any truce between our kinds is an agreement with a leader I do not follow."
The young man that Riai had first fed on stepped forward toward the older woman. In the light, the human's skin was nearly as dark as Gragon's flesh. "What do we do?" he asked. A man from the crowd answered with a voice carrying an authoritative tone.
"We will inform Low King Tanzanite about the occurrences here, and he will determine the consequences. For now, we will hold the Rhysegli." "Who will deliver the message?"
someone else asked. "I will," the dark-fleshed young man decided resolutely. "Haro," the woman said, reaching her hand out to him. "You don't have to."
"I wasn't bitten, so I'll be better suited for the journey than most others," he said. That adolescent might not feel the effects of being drained now, but he will if he tries to cross the desert in his condition.
Shuffling shadows of men crossed each other, blocking the torchlight and spinning it in all directions. Riai tried to follow where the captive was being taken, but lost track of them. Gragon scampered off. Following suit, Riai crossed the stretch of sandy dirt to the new lookout position. Riai watched the unknown captive. A group of humans dragged them inside a nearby building and locked it. After Riai sought out the keeper of the prison's key, Gragon had disappeared again. This time, Gragon moved into the streets of Fagori. If Riai hadn't used all their senses in conjunction, then they would not have recognized the nearly invisible movement of Gragon pickpocketing the key. Riai could not imagine what audaciousness the leader possessed that they could stalk right up to a man and steal something from his trousers. Gragon had impressed Riai again that evening. Once the street cleared, Gragon opened the prison door and disappeared inside. Riai held their position in the event the humans discovered either Gragon or the captive. The unknown Rhysegli darted out the door and plunged into the shadows, with Gragon trailing close behind. Nodding once, Gragon signaled for Riai to join them. On all fours, the three Rhysegli scurried back to their nest in the vampiric lands to the north. After they were certain they had escaped to safety, the trio slowed their pace and walked upright. The captive introduced themselves.
"I'm Cresco." "Riai." "Cresco is my most trusted advisor,"
Gragon said.
"Riai, it is a pleasure to meet you. Although this is the most embarrassing of circumstances. I appreciate you helping Gragon with my rescue. I haven't seen you before. You must be new." "Think nothing of it. This was my first hunt with the band." "Gragon always groups up with the new recruits. Likes to show off," Cresco said with a smirk in their tone.
Gragon brushed off the comment.
"I have the impression that Riai is not easily impressed. Decades ago, Riai had quite the reputation themselves." "I have not heard," Cresco admitted. "Gragon flatters me too highly. I'm particular with how I enjoy a meal," Riai said. "Ah, a modest talent. That's a rare find in these times," Cresco said. "Gragon, it looks like you've stepped up your recruiting efforts. I would suggest we maintain this streak if I didn't fear losing my title from it." It's odd Cresco is inclined towards a jocular manner after being held captive so recently. Perhaps they are trying to steady themselves after the escape. "You have not to concern yourself over retaining your position, so long as your counsel is honest and your friendship remains true," Gragon said. Cresco touched their tridactyl claws above their bulbous eyes and brought them down in a tight arc in front of their face's shell. "Of course, Gragon. I live to serve."